Welcome to our Access Town Hall. My name is Christine Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of Access. And this is our second town hall, if you don't count the December meeting in which we all met in person. So we're very glad to have you join us. Stephanie's controlling the slide. So next slide, Stephanie. So we like to start all of our meetings with a moment of reflection to acknowledge our respect and gratitude for the land that we are on. This is a pan-Canadian webinar today, and so people are joining us from across Turtle Island, but we wanted to start with a general acknowledgement that we as an organization recognize and acknowledge the relationship the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis across Canada have had with the land that all of us live on and cherish. And also a commitment statement from us as leaders of this organization that as we work to create and implement and continue this network, we would like to consider each of the 634 different First Nations communities, 53 Inuit communities, and 8 Métis settlements who have a unique historical, cultural, spiritual, and environmentally sustainable connection to the land that their people and ancestors have inhabited since time immemorial. And further, that this is a part of our work, that we are committed to working to build relationships that include First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start for those of you who have joined us previously on this webinar. It's always a little bit of an awkward format because you can see us, but we can't see all of you. So we have a couple of different ways to interact with us. Importantly, we are using Slido today. And if you haven't used that before, you can simply go to slido.com and enter the code there. Or you can click on that QR code. And that is the format, or that is the medium we'll be using for you to ask questions at the end of the webinar. So please go to that now if you can. And you can also upvote questions. So if you like someone else's question and want to make sure it's addressed, you can upvote it. We have left the chat button enabled, so you can put comments or reactions in chat as a way of connecting with other people on the webinar. But we would ask that you please put all the questions into Slido because that's the way we'll be addressing them at the end of the meeting. Okay, so go back. So we have a practice question for you. Actually, we have two practice questions. And the first one, for those of you who are on Slido already, is this. Happy spring. It's just spring, we realized a few days ago. In your region of Canada, did winter leave like a lion or a lamb? And we can see everyone's answers live. Apparently we don't have a lot of, oh, there, I was going to say, where are our friends from BC? It's always sunshine and daffodils in BC in the spring. Okay, so most of us apparently we're looking for our snowshoes. And some of us are still adjusting to the time change. Thank you. Okay, second practice question. So this was clearly influenced by me because this is my first day back after a vacation. But when it comes to vacations, are you looking for beach or snow? I suppose you could use SPF 30 in either. And hopefully a minimum of you are taking vacation by Zoom. Okay, we have lots of very sun-safe people on this call. That was a bit of a test. Well done. Everybody's wearing SPF 30 plus, whether you're skiing or on a beach, or hopefully not in front of a screen. Okay, next slide. So just a moment to review the agenda with you. So we are going to start with a reflection in a moment from Adrian Kodire. I'll give you a little bit of brief background on Access because not everybody will have is as deeply connected to Access as others are on this. So we just wanted to make sure we provided some context. I'll spend some time talking about the report from our December AGM. And then I will hand it over to two of our two project managers who are going to provide you with the updates on what our themes and groups have been up to. So the more detailed updates on the research. And then we'll come back and talk about our current activities and also some developing initiatives, and then make sure we have time at the end for open Q&A, hopefully at least half an hour, but essentially as much time as we need. So I'm going to hand it over to Adrienne Kodyer. So Adrienne is one of 3 co-chairs of ACCESS, along with David Malkin and Jim Whitlock, and they are responsible for the CIHR grant through which we're funded and form our executive at ACCESS. Adrienne has been an incredible leader for the ACCESS Secretariat, for me personally, and I think probably for everyone on this webinar. She is a person with lived experience and is going to share a reflection to start off the meeting.
Thanks, Christine. What a wonderful introduction. Again, my name is Adrienne Kodyer, and I'm a person with lived experience and advocate co-chair in ACCESS. Thank you for joining us today. For today's reflection, I am speaking to our commitment in ACCESS to include persons with lived experience throughout our organization in a variety of roles and in our culture and community. Recently, at the SPORE People with Lived Experience Roundtables, I was reminded of CIHR's commitment to including patient voices in research. However, our work in ACCESS is unique and goes beyond just welcoming patient partners in research to also including persons with lived experience in leadership roles throughout the organization. We are creating change on the pediatric cancer landscape, including how we organize ourselves and how we build community with people with lived experience. So next slide, please, Stephanie. So right now at ACCESS, we have the overall objectives of, as you see on your screen there, just pull that over for myself, improving research policies, practices, processes, and programs, a lot of P's there, of ACCESS by including our people with lived experience, knowledge, and insights across the organization, and the meaningful inclusion of people or persons with lived experience in all levels. So from participants in projects to patient partners to co-leads to members of senior leadership, we're all present. Planned or active items that we have on deck for ACCESS around persons with lived experience is the compensation framework, which is currently created and functional, up and running, and this involves compensating people with lived experience who participate with the organization for their time and expertise. We have a network in development. We have scheduled meetings monthly, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. We're working towards creating an advisory committee that can provide more formal feedback from persons with lived experience in our community to ACCESS. And we're in the beginning stages of starting a very large framework for persons with lived experience and how they participate in ACCESS. So that would include things like onboarding, ongoing supports, things like that. That's a big project that we're just starting to undertake this summer with some environmental scanning and research. The key anticipated impacts that we're moving towards in our work with persons with lived experience is the creation of that network that we talked about. Something that's already happening there is sending out opportunities and communications to persons with lived experience on a regular basis so they stay connected. This includes learning opportunities, other volunteer opportunities, and giving answers to questions, updates on meetings, things like that. We are ensuring that there is social space and time for persons with lived experience to connect to each other and support each other peer-to-peer as we continue our volunteer work. This is also a conduit for ACCESS to hear from persons with lived experience. So if there's questions or concerns, perhaps complaints that they want to bring to the attention of the Secretariat, this is an opportunity in a very safe and cohesive environment for folks like me to voice those concerns and receive feedback. And again, we're looking at internal and external engagement opportunities for persons with lived experience, knowing that ideally we take folks who are interested in participating, we fold them into the organization, give them lots of support, opportunities, engagement, and hopefully education as we go as well. And as those people grow, they can move back out into those communities and help even further using what they've garnered from us, and perhaps give us a little bit more support and exposure as well. So we're trying to create a fulsome network, opportunities, and a life cycle to all of this that will hopefully change the landscape for the better for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrienne. Incredibly impressive. So let me just give a little bit of brief background on ACCESS. So as you can tell from what Adrienne just described, we are really building a new kind of organization. So this is a network that is interdisciplinary, that's inclusive, and importantly, that is really interwoven with the voice of people with lived experience. And we're all driven by this need to focus our work on asking what will be transformative for children and their families experiencing cancer in Canada. Next, Stephanie. So we all have our own whys for why we're engaged in this work and dedicated to this work, but the collective mission that we are centered on is that every child with cancer in Canada will have access to the latest scientific advances, diagnostic tools, innovative therapies, and supportive care, leading to better outcomes and quality of life. How we do that, this is a network that our mission is in our name. We are about advancing childhood cancer experience, science, and survivorship, hence the word ACCESS. Our network is made up of researchers, healthcare providers, industry leaders, partner organizations, people with lived experience, all of whom believe in equitable access to scientific advances, diagnostic tools, innovative therapies, and supportive care, leading to better health outcomes and quality of life for children with cancer and their families. So our work is really twofold. One is to establish and build and expand upon and lead this multi-stakeholder pan-Canadian pediatric cancer network, and through that to support research in all phases of the pediatric cancer journey. We've had some questions, I think, about understanding how we're governed and how decisions are made. So I just wanted to spend a couple slides on that. As you heard, our people with lived experience really contribute to and also guide all aspects of our work. As network leaders, they may be project co-leads in research, they may be partners in research, and increasingly we're talking about their role as advocates. And as Adrienne just described, we have a new person with lived experience network to support our patient and parent participants. Our senior leadership committee is made up of clinicians, scientists, people with lived experience, who are really responsible for providing overarching strategic direction for ACCESS and ensuring its scientific and operational integrity. And if we've made a really conscious effort in that committee to represent a geographical balance, gender representation, different career stages of people, and different types of expertise on that committee. That committee, which is sort of the nexus of where strategic and operational decisions are made, is informed by some existing and some planned advisory committees. And for example, we are in the midst of establishing an external advisory board to guide our work from an external perspective. Each of the themes and groups, which you'll hear more about shortly, within ACCESS is overseen by co-leads, and those collective co-leads make up their own committee. In each of their themes or groups, they are responsible for prioritizing research, developing research or activities, plans, and then executing on them, and also connecting with their particular communities. And then the broader ACCESS community is all of you, and made up of some of these research project teams, different working groups, health professionals, scientists, parents, patients, advocates, and also our partner organizations. So to date, this is 600 plus strong and growing. So just next slide. So for those of you who are more graphically or pictorially focused, this is the same thing that I just described, but shown in a pictogram. And you can see there the executive, as I mentioned, those three co-chairs, Adrian, David, and Jim, and the senior leadership committee, which is really the strategic and operational center of the organization, advised upon by external advisory board that's in development and other groups and committees that we have in mind to develop. You see the co-leads there that are the co-leads from the themes and groups, and then the ACCESS community below it, including the Persons with Lived Experience Network. Next slide. So I'm going to shift into a few slides describing the outcomes of our December all members meeting. And this meeting was about advancing access, working together to improve pediatric cancer research and care. There is now a report from this meeting that we will be circulating broadly after this town hall, so you can read in more detail. But I thought this was a great opportunity to provide you with a synthesis of what we heard at that meeting. There were about 125 people that attended that meeting. And it was over 2.5 days, or 2 days, but three calendar days. So it was a huge amount of work. It was a huge amount of input, and incredibly helpful for us as the leadership of ACCESS in terms of shaping who we are and where we're going as an organization and what our priorities should be. And so I just wanted to spend a few minutes going through the report. So the three sort of key or overarching themes that emerged from that AGM. The first is that pediatric cancer care across Canada is too fragmented, it's inconsistent, and it's inaccessible to too many Canadians. Second is that there is a huge opportunity in front of us to create more integrated and inclusive approaches to cancer research and cancer care. And third, that this organization is critical and has a key role to play in that. So in the next 3 slides, I'm just going to break down each of those themes in a little bit more detail and give you some additional details around the core issues. So in that first theme around care being fragmented, inconsistent, and inaccessible, the sort of core issues that came through in the meeting were that there is inadequate accessibility and inequitable representation in clinical trials specifically. That there are significant provincial and institutional disparities in care, and that there are significant gaps in education and information that further widen the existing inequities. And in the report, there's much more detail under each of these core issues. The next theme. Second theme, this is around the opportunity that there is to create a more integrated and inclusive approach. And the core issues or the core opportunities in here were around improving connections within and between pediatric cancer research and researchers and care, increasing access to innovative therapies. That has been an overarching theme throughout the development of ACCESS. Embracing a holistic team-based approach that encompasses the entire patient journey, and closing educational and informational gaps, both for healthcare professionals and researchers, but also for patients and families. Next theme. And then the third theme around the key role that ACCESS has to play in addressing the first 2 themes. First of all, there is an opportunity, and this will require more discussion, but to develop a comprehensive national registry for pediatric cancer. ACCESS has a role to play in establishing a knowledge hub or a resource hub that can help to close those key information and education gaps that were highlighted. There's a really specific opportunity to modernize consent forms and data. There is an opportunity or a need to conduct a data environmental scan and mapping exercise so that we can get at this concern around how to share and mobilize data more effectively. Next slide. So this starts to create a blueprint for us for our path forward. Certainly in terms of strategic priorities, as an organization, we need to achieve sustainability. There's a lot of work in front of us. We need to maintain this momentum and this network and build it for the future. It's really critical that we support connectivity and inclusivity, that we need to build strategic partnerships, and we are starting to do that, and that we need to enhance data connectivity and sharing. Operationally, we are looking at launching a website and communications plan, improving information sharing and collaboration, and really increasing our stakeholder engagement and support. So if we get a little bit more specific in terms of our next steps as a secretariat and leadership, some important actions and tactics that we are taking. So under this is the bucket of sustainability and strategic planning. And by the way, this is a very rudimentary assessment where the yellow check marks are things that are planned and the green check marks are things that are actively in progress. So for sustainability and strategic planning, we need to develop a strategic sustainability and growth plan.
Thanks, David.
Under the guidance of a working group. And that is work I hope to start by mid-April. So that's very immediate. And then we need to start an early draft of ACCESS's strategic plan. And you can see that starting to gel in what I'm talking about today. Digital infrastructure and communications. So developing and launching a functional ACCESS website. We are very actively working on that in the background. And many of you have been consulted around content for that. And we are finalizing an actioning and communication strategy. And you'll start to see that monthly e-updates and social media posts, etc., are ongoing. In terms of partnership and collaboration, we are developing a partnership strategy and also, as you heard from Adrienne, establishing a Persons with Lived Experience Advisory Committee and network. And then in operational excellence and execution, we're developing reporting templates and metrics. It's the bane of our existence, but important that we all do it. To help talk about our impact, but also to build partnerships and allow us to track deliverables. We are starting to establish our cross-access priorities, so our cross-consortium priorities, along with how to action and resource them. And we are continuing to increase and appropriately support our themes and groups so that they can individually reach their goals and milestones. So as I say, next slide, as I say, we will be sharing the more detailed report following this meeting, but we wanted to give you a bit of a high-level glimpse into what it looks like and how it's shaping our priorities. So I'm going to turn it over now, because you've heard enough from me, to our two excellent project managers at ACCESS, Tricia Schneider and Jenna Craig. And they have been working with individual themes and groups to provide a single slide for each on what their current activities and impacts are. So, and I think they're alternating so they can catch their breath in between. So I think I'm turning it over to Tricia first to start.
Yes, thank you. Fundamental research in pediatric cancer has traditionally been conducted by individual researchers, which impedes progress. The cancer biology theme aims to dismantle the barriers to collaborative research, integrate existing expertise, infrastructure, and resources, and develop or expand upon where needed to foster collaborative research pathways to transform and accelerate national research endeavors, such as the identification of novel treatments for hard-to-cure pediatric cancers. This will include establishing a research network of the experts and infrastructure needed, developing the centralized infrastructure, resources, and processes to answer key biological questions, and enabling and promoting the collection and sharing of samples and data across the cancer journey. To achieve these objectives, the cancer biology theme has developed 3 large national research projects that address key gaps in the current research landscape. Each of the 3 projects are being developed to contribute to the theme's overall objectives while simultaneously advancing the understanding of 3 specific pediatric cancer types and ultimately identifying novel targets for therapy. They have also developed a comprehensive plan for 3 centralized research platform initiatives. The Biospecimen and Data Sharing and Integration Initiative aims to develop a strategy and implement the necessary processes to widely collect samples and data in a standardized manner, reduce resource duplication and data fragmentation, and accelerate research in a secure manner. The Pediatric Cancer Models and Mechanisms Network aims to streamline the research and technology pipeline for pediatric cancers in Canada. By building a national platform, this network will connect preclinical researchers with clinical researchers across the country to answer prioritized research questions. To do so, they have leveraged the existing infrastructure of the Rare Disease Models and Mechanisms Network. It is expected that this network will launch next month. The Molecular Pathology Initiative aims to identify and advance the next generation of molecular tests and accelerate their translation from research tools to tests that are suitable for widespread clinical use. In the short term, the cancer biology theme anticipates the creation of new access-wide resources to standardize research processes and promote national collaboration. In the long term, they expect that the establishment or expansion upon national core platforms and systems will increase research capacity, streamline processes, and enable effective and ethical sharing. Furthermore, they anticipate that they will have advanced our understanding on key biological questions and have new potential targets and effective diagnostic tests to show for it.
The education and training's overall objective is to improve patient involvement in pediatric cancer care and research, and to enhance career development and training opportunities for the next generation of pediatric cancer clinicians and researchers. Their planned and active projects include the development of an education hub to ensure there is access to learning opportunities and curated training for all of ACCESS. This includes a learning management system, which is a platform for the delivery of educational courses. They're also creating a process to support education and training opportunities for persons with lived experience. An environmental and needs assessment is in process to identify existing educational resources for patients, families, clinicians, researchers, to identify any gaps with the information that is available. Theme 5 is also working to establish a national patient and family education community of practice to share and standardize knowledge for those providing the education to patients and families. Their key anticipated impacts include an increased understanding of and participation in the research and work of ACCESS. By providing funding, more PWLEs can attend education events or sessions to learn more about pediatric cancer, and to provide an increased accessibility to education and training of trusted resources through a centralized location.
The clinical trials themes initiatives are aimed at enhancing the pediatric cancer clinical trial landscape in Canada. To do so, they are supporting Canadian-led clinical trials that are ready to initiate within the next year to immediately increase our national trial portfolio in the short term, while simultaneously working to establish a robust infrastructure and framework for the conduct of national trials in order to improve the overall long-term trial availability in the country. To increase the national trial portfolio in the short term, they are supporting 2 trials, which will serve as models for the development and management of future Canadian-led clinical trials. The MERV trial will investigate the benefit of combining a MEK inhibitor with standard chemotherapy for newly diagnosed pediatric low-grade glioma patients, while the VICTORY trial will determine the benefit of combining standard chemotherapy with a novel targeted therapy for patients with recurrent or progressive low-grade gliomas. Additionally, they are supporting Canadian aspects of large international consortia-based initiatives, specifically a new US-based Children's Oncology Group trial and the CAR T-cell therapy network to ensure broader access in Canada to state-of-the-art diagnostics and therapies. The Children's Oncology Group trial will investigate the benefit of combining immunotherapy with chemotherapy for pediatric ALL patients in Canada. In addition, this study will provide access to study patients with next-generation sequencing for disease monitoring, which is not routinely available in the country. The CAR T-cell therapy network plans to establish multiple pediatric CAR T-cell manufacturing sites across Canada, with the aim of improving access to both commercially available CAR T-cell therapies and CAR T-cell clinical trials. In addition, the clinical trials theme is developing the essential expertise hub for the development of future Canadian-led clinical trials, laying the groundwork for a national sponsor to streamline the initiation of these future trials, and developing the necessary processes and supports to ensure that these trials are widely accessible across the country. Finally, they are incorporating the National Pediatric Oncology Drug Access Navigator within ACCESS, who will support researchers and clinicians by providing them with expertise for the development of clinical trials, as well as assisting them in obtaining access to innovative drug therapies. In the short term, the national trial portfolio will immediately expand as these model trials are activated. Looking ahead, they envision greater trial availability nationwide as they provide the ACCESS community with the necessary expertise, infrastructure, and resources for further Canadian-led trials to be developed and conducted, as well as the necessary resources and support to increase clinical site capacity. All of this will ensure that more pediatric cancer patients in the country benefit from the innovative treatments and diagnostics only available through clinical trials.
The ethical, legal, societal issues and implementation science themes objective is to contribute to expert knowledge and support for ACCESS's study of ethical, legal, and societal implications, to provide guidance and create a data governance framework to facilitate national data sharing, to continue to foster communication of patient data and access to results by families, minors, and other healthcare providers or researchers, to create a standardized way to share sensitive data, as it is important to have the autonomy for use of their own data, and to encourage communication and discussions with appropriate stakeholders to help with addressing cross-Canada multi-centered pediatric oncology research ethics board reviews. The anticipated impacts of these projects include to establish a national pediatric cancer data governance framework, to identify barriers to communication of patient data and providing evidence-based solutions, and aiding in the development of a national strategy to streamline cross-country multi-centered research ethics.
Health systems can be complex and overwhelming, especially for those facing serious health challenges. Timely and straightforward access to appropriate resources, state-of-the-art therapies, and supportive care can positively impact treatment adherence, recovery rates, and overall well-being. Moreover, helping patients and their families navigate healthcare systems more efficiently may increase their chances of receiving the right treatment at the right time, as well as improve quality of life. Therefore, it is of paramount importance that systemic obstacles are identified and dismantled, and pathways are streamlined to ensure ease of access to innovative therapies and optimal care in the future. The aim of the Access to Innovative Therapies and Optimal Care theme is to understand the barriers that exist to accessing the best diagnostics, therapies, and care in order to break them down and develop sustainable and formalized pathways so every pediatric cancer patient in Canada receives the best treatment available. To do so, they have prioritized understanding the system-level resource and support gaps that exist, as well as the current needs of patients and their families by promoting the collection of comprehensive data across the cancer journey. These data will then inform the development of centralized frameworks, processes, and resources to improve access to innovative therapies and optimal care in the future. They also intend to identify the provincial barriers to the provision of universal access, and the system-level delays or constraints to timely access to innovative therapies in order to have the necessary information needed to eventually tackle the relevant regulations and policies that cause these issues. Ultimately, the Access to Innovative Therapies and Optimal Care theme envision a future in which pediatric cancer patients in Canada have access to cutting-edge therapies and in which pathways to care or clinical trials are clear and easy to navigate.
The psychosocial and survivorship themes objective is to advance the well-being and quality of life for pediatric oncology patients, childhood cancer survivors, and their families by preventing and managing the lingering side effects of pediatric and adolescent cancer treatments. The psychosocial co-leads are currently working to identify and pilot the implementation of a comprehensive means to assess patient-reported psychosocial health outcomes in children and psychosocial screening in their family. The survivorship team is working to develop a national passport for care to ensure best aftercare to children, adolescents, and young adult cancer survivors. They're also examining current survivorship care and transition models across pediatric cancer centers in Canada to ultimately propose a standardized set of practices to incorporate into care. And also as a whole, this theme believes it's essential to assemble resources for patients and healthcare providers that integrates local, provincial, and national resources. The key anticipated impacts include that the outcomes of the assessment will describe which psychosocial health measures for children with cancer and their families, which can then be piloted for clinical implementation. The survivorship passport for care is anticipated to streamline care, providing survivors and their families the autonomy over their own health information. The development of a Canadian framework for survivorship care will also support a person-centered and harmonized approach to care.
Within the pediatric cancer field, there are thought to be gaps in the development of policy and regulation to guide the clinical and health system implementation of novel diagnostic and therapeutic technologies as a result of a lack of consensus on how best to regulate and fund them. The regulation, policy, and economics theme aims to cultivate a landscape in which evidence-informed policies and programs drive equitable, efficient, and sustainable care for pediatric cancer patients in Canada. Currently, the focus of their work is a comprehensive analysis of the present policy and health system implementation surrounding innovative diagnostic technologies in pediatric cancer care, with a focus on disparities across the country. By scrutinizing the existing state, they aim to uncover the crucial insights needed to develop an ideal future for innovative diagnostic technology use and coverage. They are also working to develop a streamlined process to share their expertise across various projects within ACCESS to ensure that all ACCESS endeavors are rigorous and robust and collect the necessary data to inform long-term regulatory and policy change. In the short term, the regulation, policy, and economics theme anticipates the creation of a descriptive map of the Canadian policy landscape for innovative diagnostic technologies. This map will assist in the development of recommendations poised to harmonize pathways for accessing these diagnostics across Canada, as well as hopefully in the long term, inform the development and implementation of future policies that pave the way for fair and sustainable access to all innovative technologies.
The Social Justice, Indigenization, and Inclusion Committee is a cross-cutting group within ACCESS with overarching goals to ensure that the whole diverse community is included and to aim for a greater inclusion for equitable and just care for pediatric cancer patients and their families across Canada. The SJII committee is currently creating guidelines for inclusion of equity-deserving groups in the work of ACCESS. They're reviewing project proposals to ensure those adhere to those guidelines, to build expert councils with equity-deserving populations, beginning with Indigenous collaborators to ensure appropriate data governance and project directions, and to develop projects that ultimately answer questions being asked by our community. The SJII committee has worked to distribute a survey to the clinical research assistants across Canada to confirm the areas of and level of training for sensitive data collection across the institutions. They are also creating guidance documents on the appropriate collection of patient sociodemographic data. The key anticipated impacts include to provide a better understanding of the training needs for the collection of sensitive data for those who are involved in collecting the data, and to create clear and consistent expectations nationally to appropriately collect sociodemographic data in meaningful and impactful ways.
A wealth of knowledge already exists across the ACCESS community and the pediatric cancer field. We have the opportunity to harness this knowledge and bridge the gap from knowledge to practice in ways that benefit the full scope of knowledge users, patients and their families, healthcare providers, industry leaders, and policymakers. We also have the opportunity to benefit from the breadth of experience that exists within our community by ensuring that all stakeholders are provided with the information they need at the right time of the research or care continuum and in mediums that make the information accessible to all. The Cross-Cutting Knowledge Mobilization Group aims to provide knowledge mobilization support to the broader ACCESS community by equipping them with the expertise, resources, and tools they need to share knowledge in impactful ways across the variety of stakeholders that exist within our community and across the research and care journeys. To do so, they are currently working towards assessing the knowledge mobilization needs of the Canadian pediatric cancer community while simultaneously reviewing relevant programs that exist nationally and globally. They will then develop an inventory of exemplary knowledge mobilization products, events, and networks, along with creating innovative new knowledge mobilization tools for the benefit of the entire ACCESS community. Furthermore, they also aim to advance the knowledge on the inclusion of youth engagement within pediatric cancer research so that we can build our capacity for greater engagement in the future. In the short term, the Knowledge Mobilization Group expects to describe and prioritize the knowledge mobilization needs across all ACCESS themes, as well as evaluate other programs in child health that are already available nationally and internationally. They then intend to curate any existing materials and develop knowledge mobilization products or model products and workshops to effectively address the needs of our community. The Knowledge Mobilization Group's long-term vision includes increasing our capacity to effectively and efficiently mobilize information across knowledge user groups so that all relevant individuals receive the information they need at the right time and in the most effective medium for them. They also intend to increase our capacity to effectively engage youth in pediatric cancer research so that we can benefit from their important insights throughout the research process.
So hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Grover and I'm the Director of ACCESS. So I just wanted to thank Jenna and Trisha for presenting about all of the themes and groups. All of these themes and groups that you've heard updates about, there is so much going on, but they're also actively trying to make connections with one another to make sure that all the work is connected and fulsome. And this is a picture diagram of how all these connections are starting to form with real conversations that are happening between the groups, looking at different projects that overlap and making sure that we're looking at the cancer journey and all the work we do in a holistic manner. So to continue on, the next item on the agenda was for us to update on some current and developing initiatives. And I'm going to just walk through a snapshot of what's been going on since January and taking us through until the spring and June, or I guess we're in the spring, so into June. So in February, there was the announcement of the amalgamation of Profile into ACCESS. Today, in March, we're having the second town hall. In April, there will be presentations at AACR, the American Association for Cancer Research. And in May, there will be presentations about ACCESS in Australia at the Zero Childhood Cancer Symposium and associated research updates, including many other local and national presentations throughout. Finally, we do have our CIHR reporting progress report due in June, and we're working towards collecting all of the information about the progress that we're making throughout all of the themes and all of the work we're doing across the network. Throughout all this, there's been project development, project submissions, approval, and funding and execution of different of the work throughout all the themes. The themes and groups have been having open meetings to share their advancements and their planning with their different stakeholder groups. We've been working on some of the communication outputs that Christine had been mentioning, including the website development, which we plan to be able to launch at the later spring or early summer. And as we move forward into the spring now, sustainability and growth planning and partnership strategy development is a key focus of the initiative as a whole. So one of the things that was just mentioned was the amalgamation of Profile into ACCESS. And Profile stands for the Precision Oncology for Young People program, which is a pan-Canadian precision medicine platform. Profile was originally launched in 2017 And the objective of it was to conduct molecular profiling or sequencing on tumors from children, adolescents, and young adults to learn more about their cancers and to find individualized treatment options for them. Profile has included all 16 pediatric cancer centers across Canada and several adult centers. And the stakeholders that have been involved at all of the different institutions across the country, the sequencing centers, the biobanks, all of our research partners in modeling proteomics, biomarkers, and more, including those people, the oncologists, the clinical research staff, patient, parent, and family partners, and our dedicated funding supporters and partners and collaborations nationally and internationally has been what has driven Profile forward. So in ACCESS, there's been a gap in activities that are related to genomic medicine and molecular profiling. And this research is key in supporting much of the different work that we're doing across ACCESS. And it also helps support several of the current initiatives and proposed projects throughout the ACCESS program. So with that, having the precision medicine program be part of ACCESS presents an opportunity not only to be able to have more fulsome research developed and facilitates development of new projects, but also allows us to attract other partners that have a unique interest in the precision medicine area. So Profile is being amalgamated into ACCESS as a driver project, and a driver project is an initiative that is undertaken to address broader needs in the pediatric cancer community in Canada. It must have the potential to significantly improve the childhood cancer journey, and it must be relevant to at least 3 of the themes that have been discussed earlier in this town hall, and also reflect the practices of social justice, indigenization, and inclusion, and have planned knowledge mobilization outputs. So Profile is just the first, but it is the first driver project within ACCESS, and we expect to have multiple other cross-ACCESS initiatives that develop as we proceed as well. So with that being said, coming back to what Christine was talking about earlier in the What We Heard report, there's been lots of great feedback from our first ACCESS annual general meeting. Lots of the feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but constructive advice that was provided is going to help us plan the future meeting. And I'm happy to announce that our second annual general meeting is currently being planned. It will be held in Toronto in January of 2025, January 27th and 28th. And we will send more information as it becomes available, but please save the dates in your calendar so that we can meet with you all at that time. So with that being said, before I continue, I also want to share with everyone that the recording of this town hall will be able to be shared following the town hall in the upcoming days. So if you missed anything or want to refer back, you'll be able to. So at this point in time, we will move forward to Q&A or questions and answers. So if you have closed your Slido or you didn't have it open yet, please consider scanning this QR code or going to slido.com and entering ACCESS March Town Hall, and you'll be able to start entering questions there. We'll leave this up for a moment. And we'll move on to if there are any questions that we can help address.
So there is a question in the chat. Maybe someone having trouble with the Slido, but there is a question in the chat around funding for Profile. Stephanie, David, who would like to address that?
So Profile funding has always been a consortium of funders that have come together, and going forward, it will be much the same, going to the sequencing efforts across the country. There will be, as it becomes part of the amalgamation into ACCESS, There will be sustainability planning for the financial sustainability of ACCESS as a whole, and profile will be part of that planning process and to continue moving forward. So it will be an effort that is a collective effort.
So Neil, just in response to the rest of your question about being told there's only limited funding and you have to pick and choose. To a certain degree, that's always been the case, the picking and choosing. There are criteria, of course, for identifying and then enrolling patients into profile. And we encourage you to continue just identifying and submitting requests for sequencing as you previously done. That process doesn't change. As you know, there's a committee that determines based on the inclusion criteria of whether it's appropriate or not. To this point, we've not had to, the only period of time where we needed to put a pause on this was during the early 3 months of COVID, when the 3 sequencing centers were actually in a process of figuring out if they would be able to sequence. But since then, we've not had to turn anything down that was appropriately referred. So that's the plan going forward. The criteria, of course, still are the same, which is, among other things, one being for children who are, or for children and young adults who are a predicted survival of less than 50 or less than 30%. That hasn't changed to this point.
Okay, thank you, David. We have a number of questions about CAR T cells. So, and I don't know who's most comfortable answering them. I know that Tricia has been supporting the work. And this is, these are a little bit more detailed maybe than we can answer, but I'll maybe point
I'm
out.
happy to take a stab at it.
Okay, great, Jim, that would be great, especially that first one around acute and chronic side effect monitoring.
Well, so for commercial CAR T cells, it's a requirement that patients be followed for acute and chronic long-term side effects. There remain concerns, including recent emerging concerns about long-term side effects that can only be found through long-term follow-up. And it's for any clinical trials going forward, I'm sure that review committees, data safety monitoring committees will have very similar requirements. So for every investigational therapy or any commercial therapy, that's going to be embedded in the protocols. Is the clinical trial project CAR T cell therapy network the same thing as the CCTG-led Accelerate project? I'm sorry, but I honestly don't know the answer to that. So I'll have to pass on that one. And then I think the next question is not related to CAR T cells.
Right. And I think to go back to that one, thank you, Jim, to go back to the CAR T one just before, it's not the same. We're looking at setting up something in pediatrics that is a little bit like the CLICK trial, if people are familiar with that BioCanRx led, but this is really about setting up the infrastructure to do point of care CAR T cell manufacturing in pediatrics. So I'll go to the next question around developing a comprehensive national registry. Yeah, you heard me say that one a little bit cautiously when I talked about it. This is probably one of the more aspirational ideas that came out of the AGM. And I don't know yet what it would look like. The idea there was that we formally connect every child diagnosed with cancer in Canada with ACCESS to create a sort of comprehensive feedback loop and connect all the research and clinical care data into one place. It's a little bit of a halcyon idea, I would say. And obviously would be incredibly powerful, but whether or not we could do that and the barriers to that or to doing that would have to be explored before we figure out what it might look like. But it's something for us to consider exploring as a more long-term goal, I would say. And hi, welcome to the new person. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to let Stephanie answer this, but the question is really around how the money is used and allocated and divided for each theme. And the answer is yes, it is. And Stephanie, I don't know if you want to give a little bit more detail. It was based on the original CIHR application.
So what Christine said is correct, everybody. The money is allocated to all of the different themes, and those themes, as she was saying, have been going through prioritization processes according to what was proposed in the CIHR grant and other priorities. And with that, project proposals and work proposals are put forward to utilize those funds based on those prioritizations and the group across all those who are involved. And so, yes, in a way, it is allocated to everyone who is participating in any of the work in ACCESS, that as long as the work is prioritized, and then that's what the funds can be used.
Okay. Jim, how do you feel about tackling this one?
Happy to do so. So AALL 2131 is an upcoming Children's Oncology Group sponsored clinical trial, which includes, as a part of its standard of care, next generation sequencing to look at minimal residual disease. Minimal residual disease testing is now, by next generation sequencing, is now commercially available in the US. It's not available in Canada. Participation in AALL 2131 requires this testing to be done, and in the US, it will all be billed to third-party payers. Because that testing is not available, Canadian children would not be able to participate in AALL 2131 because there was no funding for the molecular sequencing. So ACCESS was approached about funding solely the next generation sequencing, which would then allow Canadian children to be able to participate in that trial, and that's the aspect that is was submitted and is approved for funding.
I think the next one's mine, Jim. So we have thought about including children in the work of peoples or persons with lived experience. We have a participatory action research project underway that is specifically about how to include current patients in pediatric cancer in our work. We need to see what comes out of that as to what the best mechanisms are for including children in the work that we do in this community in a way that best serves them, is thoughtful and considerate of them as both children and patients. So to jump on any sort of thing that would involve them in this moment, I would say we're not doing that, but rather we're taking a slower, more cautioned approach about how we can include them safely and equitably in the work that we're doing, and how that might look for ACCESS and more generally. So I can tell you that we are undertaking research to see how we can get that done.
Thanks, Adrienne. So thank you for the vote of confidence and the long-term funding model for ACCESS. So this is obviously of paramount importance for us. The current funding is through a CIHR grant, as you heard earlier, and that money will take us till March 2026. If not slightly longer, but that's the current end date. And our work, and my work in particular, over the next 6 months is really to develop a plan and start to execute on what that long-term funding looks like. We are all in the leadership of ACCESS totally committed to sustaining this. This is a long-term plan, and this network is meant to sustain our work and work of people following us for years. So that I don't have an easy answer for that yet, except that I think it will be a combination of working with partners, of working with governments. There may involve advocacy. It may involve working with fundraising partners. So we'll have to have a diversity of approaches to sustain this work. But I think first and foremost, we've been focused on showing our impact and why it's so important, and the sort of pan-Canadian-ness of this and how it is connected to everything that we're doing. And through that, we will have a case really to say why it's so important and why it needs to continue. So that will be a significant focus, and I look forward to telling you more about that in the next town hall. And then the next question around, do we have a plan to advocate for a centralized RAB for pediatric oncology clinical trials? So yes and no. There is a national initiative called CHEER that's around developing a centralized RAB for not just for oncology, but for pediatric trials. So we are certainly keeping an eye on that work, but also focused on the need to make clinical trials more efficient and more effective. And some of the solution to that may be a centralized RAB. Some of the solution to that may be being more consistent in some of our legal forms and practices, consistent in consent forms, for example, and trying to bring more universality to some of the administration of clinical trials. So certainly there has been discussion about a centralized RAB, and there is a project that hasn't quite been launched yet, but is in development around trying some innovative new approaches to facilitate access to clinical trials and overcome some of these administrative barriers. So there'll be more about that in future, but I know for many people that idea of a centralized RAB is a single Canadian RAB is certainly an aspiration, and we're certainly well aware of that as a potential solution. Okay.
I guess the next question.
Sure. Yeah, that's actually something we're doing now.
Yeah, so this work proposal actually has just recently been approved. And so we plan to be able to help announce that there will be a process by which people with limited experience can apply to have some subsidized funding to help attend educational sessions and conferences and workshops shortly. So stay tuned, coming very soon.
We're just reminding you in case you haven't run out of questions. So I think this was mentioned, but we will share a recording of this afterwards so that people can review it and review the slides again. And I would say that your questions do not have to be limited to Slido. So if you have any questions you think of after the town hall or after reviewing it, you are always welcome to reach out to any of us. And we're happy to address any questions. Okay, so I don't see any more. So we'll just end by saying thank you, merci, miigwech. We're working on a website, so there's just sort of a placeholder website there, but you can see the address. And please follow us on LinkedIn or on Instagram, and we are happy to connect individually as well. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you in person at the next AGM, but certainly seeing many of you in meetings between now and then. Thank you.